The rain was relentless, hammering Seattle's streets like it was trying to drown the city's secrets. Ezra Cole stood under the awning of a coffee shop, his hoodie soaked, heart pounding louder than the storm. He'd seen Julian Navarro across the park, laughing with friends, and it hit him like a freight train. I'm in love with him, and it's going to destroy me. Ezra wasn't supposed to feel this way. He was the quiet kid from a small town in Oregon, raised on hand-me-downs and his mother's tired prayers. Moving to Seattle for college was his chance to disappear into the crowd, to be nobody. But Julian was somebody. Charismatic, sharp-witted, with a smile that could unravel anyone. He was the star of the university's theater program, the guy who could command a room with a single glance. Ezra, with his thrift store jackets and anxious stammer, was invisible. Or so he thought. They met in a literature class, paired for a project on Whitman's poetry. Ezra had been terrified, fumbling through notes while Julian leaned back, effortlessly quoting lines like they were written for him. "You're overthinking it," Julian had said, his voice warm, teasing. "Just feel the words." Ezra felt more than the words that day. He felt Julian's presence, the way his laugh filled the air, the way his dark eyes lingered a second too long. It was the start of something dangerous. Now, 3 months later, Ezra stood frozen, watching Julian across the park. The rain blurred his vision, but he could still make out Julian's silhouette, tall, confident, untouchable. Ezra's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his roommate. "Sam, stop staring and go talk to him. You coward." Sam knew. Of course he did. Ezra had spilled his heart one drunken night, confessing how Julian's every word, every glance, felt like a hook in his chest. Sam's advice was always the same. Tell him. What's the worst that could happen? The worst. Julian could laugh. Or worse, he could pity him. Ezra wasn't sure which would hurt more. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, the cold biting his knuckles. He wasn't brave like Julian, who wore his queerness like a badge of honor, unapologetic and fierce. Ezra was still figuring himself out, wrestling with years of small-town shame that clung like damp clothes. Coming out to Sam had been hard enough. The thought of confessing to Julian felt like stepping off a cliff. But then Julian turned, catching Ezra's gaze through the rain. His smile faltered, replaced by something softer. Curious. He waved, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. Ezra's breath caught. Move, he told himself. Just move. His legs obeyed before his brain could stop them, carrying him across the wet grass toward Julian. "Hey, you're soaked," Julian said as Ezra reached him, his voice laced with concern. Up close, Julian was even more overwhelming. His leather jacket glistened, his hair slightly mussed from the wind. "What are you doing out here?" Ezra opened his mouth, but the words tangled. I saw you." Brilliant. He wanted to sink into the ground. Julian raised an eyebrow, amused. "Saw me? You were staring like I was about to vanish." His tone was light, but his eyes searched Ezra's face, like he was trying to read something hidden there. "I wasn't." Ezra started, then stopped. He could feel the heat creeping up his neck. "I just needed some air." Julian tilted his head, unconvinced. "Air? Huh. In a monsoon." He stepped closer, and Ezra's heart stuttered. "Come on. Let's get you out of this rain." They ended up in a diner nearby, the kind with sticky tables and neon signs buzzing in the windows. Julian ordered coffee for both of them, ignoring Ezra's protests. "You look like you need it," he said, sliding a mug across the table. Their fingers brushed as Ezra took it, and he swore the room tilted. "So," Julian said, leaning back in the booth, "what's got you wandering in storms?" Ezra Cole, you're not usually this reckless. Ezra stared into his coffee, the steam curling like his thoughts. He wanted to tell Julian everything, how his laugh was the only thing that made sense in this chaotic city, how every moment near him felt like stealing fire. But the words stayed locked in his throat. Instead, he mumbled, just needed to think. Julian's smile softened. You think too much. You know that. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and Ezra felt the air shift. You're always so quiet, but I can tell there's a whole world going on in there. He tapped his temple, mimicking Ezra's nervous habit. Ezra's chest tightened. He sees me. Not the invisible kid. Not the nervous wreck, just him. It was too much and not enough all at once. He wanted to ask how Julian did it, how he carried himself with such fearless ease. He wanted to ask why Julian kept seeking him out, why he lingered after class, why he texted Ezra memes at 2 a.m. But fear held him back. The conversation drifted to safer ground: books, classes, the play Julian was rehearsing. Ezra listened, hanging on every word, memorizing the way Julian's hands moved when he got excited. By the time they left the diner, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the city felt quieter, like it was holding its breath. Walk with me, Julian asked, nodding toward the park. Ezra nodded, unable to say no. They walked side by side, their shoulders brushing occasionally, each touch sending a jolt through Ezra's veins. The park was empty now, the wet leaves glowing under streetlights. Julian stopped by a bench, running his fingers over its weathered surface. You ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what? Julian's voice was low, almost lost in the night air. He wasn't looking at Ezra, but the question felt personal, like a door left ajar. Ezra swallowed. All the time. Julian turned then, his eyes catching the light. Yeah. He stepped closer, and Ezra's pulse roared. What are you waiting for, Ezra? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Ezra's mind screamed at him to run, to hide, but his heart rooted him to the spot. Julian was close enough that Ezra could smell the rain on his jacket, could see the faint scar above his eyebrow. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but doubt clawed at him. How could someone like him ever want someone like me? I don't know, Ezra whispered, his voice breaking. It was a lie, and Julian's eyes said he knew it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Julian's hand brushed Ezra's, deliberate this time, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. You're a mystery, Ezra Cole, Julian said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made Ezra's knees weak. But I'm pretty good at solving mysteries. Ezra's breath hitched. He wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that Julian saw something worth wanting. But the fear was still there, whispering that this was too good, too fragile. As they stood there, the rain starting to fall again, Ezra felt the first crack in his carefully built walls. He wasn't ready for what came next, but he couldn't turn back now. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and unspoken truths. Ezra found himself orbiting Julian like a moth drawn to a flame, terrified of getting too close, but unable to stay away. They studied together in the library, their knees brushing under the table, and shared late-night texts that felt like secrets. Each interaction left Ezra dizzy, caught between hope and dread. Julian was relentless in his pursuit, not overt, but steady, like a tide wearing down stone. He'd show up at Ezra's dorm with takeout, claiming he accidentally ordered too much. He'd drag Ezra to rehearsal, insisting he needed an honest critic. Ezra went along, helpless against Julian's charm. But every smile, every casual touch, deepened the ache in his chest. He was falling, and there was no safety net. One night, at a cast party for Julian's play, The tension snapped. The apartment was crowded, music pulsing through the walls. Ezra hovered on the edges, nursing a soda, feeling out of place among Julian's theater friends. They were loud, vibrant, unapologetically themselves, everything Ezra wasn't. He was about to leave when Julian found him, eyes bright from a few drinks. "You're not bailing already, are you?" Julian teased, leaning against the wall beside Ezra. His voice was warm, but there was an edge to it, like he was daring Ezra to stay. "I'm not really good at this," Ezra admitted, gesturing vaguely at the chaos around them. "Parties. People." Julian's smile softened. "You're good at being you. That's enough." He said it so easily, like it was obvious, and Ezra's heart twisted. Before he could respond, Julian grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the balcony. "Come on. You need air." Outside, the city sparkled below, a sea of lights against the dark. Julian didn't let go of Ezra's hand, and the warmth of his grip felt like a promise. "You're always so quiet at these things," Julian said, leaning against the railing. "But I see you, Ezra. You think I don't, but I do." Ezra's throat tightened. "You don't know me," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Not really." Julian turned, his expression serious. "Then tell me who you are, Ezra. The real you." The weight of the request pressed against Ezra's chest. He wanted to spill everything the years of hiding, the fear of being seen, the way Julian made him feel alive and terrified all at once. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he looked away, his eyes burning. "I'm not like you," he said finally. "I'm not brave." Julian's laugh was soft, almost sad. "You think I'm brave, Ezra? I'm terrified half the time. Being out, being loud, it's not about not being scared. It's about doing it anyway." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "And you're braver than you think. You're here, aren't you?" Ezra's breath caught. Julian was so close now, his face illuminated by the city's glow. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Ezra wanted to close the gap, to let himself fall. But the voice in his head was relentless. "He's out of your league. He'll break your heart." Then Julian spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ezra, I like you. A lot." The words were simple, but they hit like a tidal wave, washing away Ezra's defenses. Julian's eyes were steady, unguarded, and for the first time, Ezra saw the vulnerability beneath his confidence. "I've been trying to figure you out for weeks," Julian continued, a nervous laugh escaping him. "But I'm done guessing. I need to know if you feel this too." Ezra's mind reeled. "He likes me." It didn't make sense. Julian, with his effortless charm, could have anyone. Why him? Doubt clawed at him. But Julian's hand tightened around his, anchoring him to the moment. Ezra started, his voice trembling. "I don't know how to do this." Julian's smile was small, tentative. "Me neither. But we can figure it out together." They stood there, hands clasped, the city humming below. Ezra felt the weight of his fear. But for the first time, it wasn't heavier than his hope. He didn't say anything called, but he squeezed Julian's hand. A silent answer. It was enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. They went on dates, quiet ones, like walks through Pike Place Market or coffee at hole-in-the-wall shops. Julian was patient, letting Ezra set the pace. But every touch, every shared glance, pushed Ezra closer to the edge of something new. He started to believe this could be real, that maybe he was enough. But doubt lingered, a shadow that grew when Julian wasn't around. Ezra's past wasn't easy to shake. His father's disapproval, the whispers in his hometown, The fear that love like this came with a cost. When Julian invited him to meet his friends, Ezra froze. It wasn't just a hangout. It was a step into Julian's world. A world where Ezra wasn't sure he belonged. You don't have to, Julian said, sensing his hesitation. They were sitting on Ezra's dorm bed. Julian's arms slung casually around him. But they'd love you. I know they would. Ezra wanted to believe him. But the thought of being really seen made his stomach churn. What if they don't? He asked, his voice small. What if I'm not enough? Julian's expression softened, and he tilted Ezra's chin up, forcing their eyes to meet. You're more than enough. You're you. That's why I'm here. Ezra's heart ached with the weight of Julian's words. He wanted to trust them, to let go of the fear that had defined him for so long. But as Julian leaned in, kissing him softly, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that this happiness was temporary, that something was waiting to tear it apart. The first crack came unexpectedly, like a fault line splitting the earth. Ezra had started to let himself believe in Nissim and Julian, a fragile but growing thing. But then he met Julian's friends. They were at a bar downtown, a lively group of theater kids and activists, all of them loud and unapologetic. Ezra felt like an outsider, his quiet demeanor drowned out by their energy. Julian fit here, his laughter blending with theirs, while Ezra clung to the edges. Invisible again. One of Julian's friends, Mia, noticed his discomfort. She was kind, pulling him into conversation. But her questions about his life, his family, his past felt like probes into a wound. So, Ezra, she said, sipping her drink, how'd you end up with our resident heartthrob? The question was playful, but it stung. Ezra forced a smile, mumbling something about their lit class. But the doubt crept in. How did I end up with him? Julian's hand found his under the table. A quiet reassurance. But it wasn't enough to silence the voice in Ezra's head. That night, back at Julian's apartment, Ezra's fears spilled out. Do you ever think this is a mistake? He asked, his voice barely audible. They were sitting on the couch, a movie playing in the background. Ignored. Julian frowned, setting down his beer. A mistake. Ezra, what are you talking about? You, Ezra said, gesturing vaguely. You're confident. You're out. You've got this whole life. He stopped, his throat tight. I'm just me. Julian's expression hardened, not with anger, but with something fiercer determination. Don't do that, he said, his voice low. Don't talk like you're less than me. You're not just anything. Ezra, you're the guy who makes me laugh when I'm stressed, who sees things I miss, who makes me want to be better. Ezra's eyes burned, but he couldn't look away. Julian's words were a lifeline, but they also terrified him. What if I can't keep up? He whispered. What if I ruin this? Julian reached for him, pulling him close. You won't. We're in this together. Okay. You and me. For a while, it worked. Julian's stubborn faith in them kept Ezra afloat. They spent weekends exploring the city, stealing kisses in quiet corners, building a world that felt like theirs. But the cracks kept growing. Ezra's phone started buzzing with texts from his mother, asking when he'd come home for a visit. He hadn't told her about Julian, hadn't told her he was queer. The thought of it made his stomach twist. His hometown wasn't like Seattle. It was a place where people like him stayed hidden. One evening, while they were cooking dinner in Julian's tiny kitchen, Ezra's phone rang. It was his mom. He stepped outside to take the call, his heart pounding. Her voice was warm but probing, asking about school, about his life. You sound different, she said. Is there someone special? Ezra froze, the lie ready on his tongue. No, he said, Too quickly. Just busy. When he hung up, Julian was watching him from the doorway, his expression unreadable. You didn't tell her, he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. Ezra's shoulders slumped. It's complicated. My family, they wouldn't understand. Julian nodded, but there was a flicker of hurt in his eyes. I get it. It's your pace. But Ezra, I'm not a secret. I can't be. The words hung heavy between them. Ezra wanted to promise he'd tell her, that he'd be brave, but the fear was too strong. Instead, he changed the subject, and Julian let him. But the air felt different now. Strained. The breaking point came at Julian's play. Ezra sat in the audience, watching Julian command the stage, his presence magnetic. The story was about love and sacrifice, and Julian's performance was raw, devastating. Ezra felt proud, but also small, like he could never match that kind of brilliance. After the show, Julian found him in the lobby, still buzzing with adrenaline. You were amazing, Ezra said, meaning it. Julian grinned, but his eyes were searching. You okay? You've been quiet all night. Ezra hesitated, the weight of everything crashing down. His family, his fears, the gap between who he was and who Julian deserved. I don't know if I can do this, he said, his voice breaking. You're too much for me. Julian's face fell. Too much. Ezra, what does that even mean? It means I'm not enough. Ezra snapped, louder than he meant to. Heads turned, but he didn't care. You're out there living your truth, and I'm still hiding. I can't be what you need. Julian grabbed his arm, his grip firm but gentle. Stop deciding what I need. I need you, Ezra, exactly as you are. But Ezra couldn't hear it. Not then. The fear was louder, drowning out everything else. He pulled away, mumbling an apology, and walked out into the rain. Julian didn't follow, and that hurt more than anything. The days without Julian were a quiet kind of agony. Ezra went through the motions classes. Work, sleep, but everything felt gray, like the color had drained from the world. He avoided the park, the diner, anywhere that held memories of them. Sam tried to help, dragging him to movies or forcing him to eat. But Ezra's heart wasn't in it. He'd pushed Julian away, and the regret was a weight he couldn't shake. He kept replaying that night. Julian's hurt expression, the way his own fear had won. He'd thought he was protecting himself, but all he'd done was build a new cage. The truth was, he loved Julian fiercely, desperately, and that love was worth the risk. One morning, Ezra woke to a text from Julian. Meet me at the park. Please. His heart lurched. He didn't know what to expect, but he couldn't say no. Not this time. The park was quiet, the air crisp with early winter. Julian was waiting by the same bench from that rainy night, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw Ezra. You came, he said, almost surprised. I had to, Ezra said, his voice raw. I messed up. Julian. I'm sorry. Julian shook his head. Don't. I pushed too hard. I should have given you time. Ezra took a shaky breath. It's not about time. It's about me being scared. I've spent my whole life hiding, thinking it was safer that way. But then I met you. And you ruined me. He laughed. A broken sound. You made me want to be brave. And I didn't know how. Julian stepped closer, his expression soft. You're braver than you think. Ezra, you're here now. Ezra's eyes burned with unshed tears. I love you, he said, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. I love you, and it terrifies me, but I don't want to lose you. Julian's breath caught, and then he was pulling Ezra into his arms, holding him tight. "You won't," he whispered. "I love you too." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the world fading away. It wasn't a perfect ending. Ezra still had to face his family, his fears, the world that wouldn't always be kind. But for the first time, he believed he could. Julian's love wasn't a cure for his doubts, but it was a light, guiding him forward. They sat on the bench, hands entwined, talking until the sun dipped low. Ezra told Julian about his hometown, his mother's expectations, the weight of silence. Julian listened, his thumb tracing circles on Ezra's hand, offering quiet strength. In return, Julian shared his own fears about failing, about not being enough for the people he loved. They were messy, imperfect, but together, they were enough. Ezra came out to his mother a week later, his voice shaking over the phone. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "I just want you to be happy." It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. Julian was there when he hung up, pulling him into a hug, whispering, "I'm proud of you." Their story wasn't over. There would be more fights, more fears, more moments of doubt. But as they walked through the park, Julian's arm around Ezra's shoulders, the carved bench behind them, Ezra felt something new, hope. Not the fragile kind, but the kind that grows from love, from choosing each other, no matter the cost. He confessed so softly. "It ruined me," Ezra thought, smiling to himself. But it was the kind of ruin that built something better, something real. And for the first time, he believed he was worthy of it.